Hey there. Global trade is what makes our world go round. We see the container ships, we hear about the big trade deals, but underneath all that, there's this incredibly complex engine. So who's actually pulling the levers? Who gets richer from all this? And is everyone getting a fair shake? To figure that out, we've got to look at the blueprint.
You've probably heard the story that global trade is a simple win-win for everybody. But, well, the reality is, it's a lot more complicated than that. And to really get our heads around it, we need a specific kind of economic toolkit.
And that toolkit is called the Standard Trade Model. Now, I know, it sounds a little academic, right? But honestly, just think of it as the master key that unlocks all the secrets of global trade. It helps us understand not just what countries are trading, but why they're trading it. And, most importantly, who's getting the biggest piece of the pie.
Okay, so let's start with the most basic question of all. Why do we even bother with trade in the first place? The answer is really simple, but it's also incredibly powerful.
Just imagine a country totally cut off from the rest of the world. Everything it has, its standard of living, its wealth, it's all capped by whatever it can make on its own. It's basically stuck inside a closed box.
But the moment you open that box and start trading, something almost magical happens. By focusing on what it does best and trading for the rest, a country can suddenly get its hands on way more stuff than it could ever make by itself.
And this, right here, is the whole point. This ability to consume beyond your own production limits, that's the fundamental gain from trade. It's the reason we build massive ports and negotiate complex treaties. It literally makes the economic pie bigger for everyone.
All right, so trade is good, we get it. But the next big question is, how good is it? And are the benefits the same for everyone? To answer that, we need to talk about what might be the single most important concept in international economics.
It's called the terms of trade, and it sounds technical, but it's actually pretty straightforward. It's just a ratio, the price of the stuff you sell to the world divided by the price of the stuff you buy from the world, how much you get for what you give.
The best way to picture it is like a giant master lever for a country's well-being. When that lever gets pulled up or pushed down, a nation's economic fortunes can change in a huge way. So how does that actually work?
Well, the stakes are pretty clear. If your terms of trade are improving, it means your exports are becoming more valuable compared to your imports. Every container ship you send out buys you more stuff in return. Your country gets richer. But if your terms of trade worsen, the opposite happens. You're working just as hard, sending out just as much stuff, but you're getting less and less back from the world.
So if this master lever is so incredibly important, what moves it? Well, one of the biggest drivers is something we see in the headlines every single day: economic growth. But as we're about to see, not all growth is the same.
I mean, this is a classic debate, right? When a huge economy like China or the US has a massive boom, should everyone else be cheering them on, or should they be a little worried? The standard trade model gives us a really interesting kind of nuanced answer.
See, it all comes down to the type of growth. If a country has export-biased growth, meaning it gets way better at making the stuff it already sells to the world, it can actually flood the market, and that drives down the price of its own exports. It's totally counterintuitive, but this worsens its terms of trade. But if it has import-biased growth, getting better at making things it used to buy from others, that actually improves its terms of trade.
And this is where it gets really wild. A country's big export boom can actually end up hurting its own welfare while helping its trading partners because they get to buy cheaper stuff. But the reverse is true for import-focused growth. A country can make itself richer while its partners get a worse deal. It's this fascinating hidden trade-off.
So seriously, the next time you see a news story about some country's economic miracle, you'll know the real question to ask isn't just how fast are they growing, it's what kind of growth is it? The answer to that changes literally everything for the rest of the world.
Now, of course, countries don't just sit around and wait for growth to happen. Oh no, they actively try to grab that master lever, the terms of trade, and pull it in their favor. And the two most common tools they use to do that are tariffs and subsidies.
So here's the playbook for how a tariff can work, at least for a big country. First, you slap a tariff on something. Let's say imported food. That makes it more expensive inside your country. So your own farmers start producing more, and your consumers start buying a little less. This reduces your country's overall demand on the world market, which can actually push the global price of food down. And just like that, you've improved your terms of trade.
So the main takeaway here is really simple. Tariffs and subsidies are polar opposites. A tariff, by making imports more expensive, can actually improve a large country's terms of trade, and maybe even its overall welfare. But an export subsidy, where you're paying your own companies to sell more stuff abroad, does the exact opposite. It tanks your terms of trade, and is basically like sending a check from your taxpayers to foreign consumers.
Okay, so we've been talking a lot about countries getting richer. But, a country isn't a single person. We've been looking at the really big picture. Now it's time to zoom all the way in and ask the final, and maybe the most important, question of all.
So even if a nation as a whole is getting richer from trade, is everyone inside that country getting an equal slice of that newly expanded pie? Well, it turns out the answer is a big, clear no. So who gets the biggest slice? The answer might really surprise you. And it all comes down to this number, 35%. What's that about?
It's estimated that the economic boost from trade is a whopping 35% bigger for a consumer in the bottom 10th of the income ladder compared to someone in the top 10th. That's a huge difference. So what's going on here? Why does this happen?
Well, the reason is actually pretty simple. It's all about what people buy. Lower-income families spend a much bigger chunk of their budget on things that are heavily traded, like food, clothes, shoes, stuff that has gotten way cheaper because of trade. Wealthier people, on the other hand, spend more of their money on services, which aren't traded as much. Now, the last point here is absolutely critical. Everyone still wins. Trade lifts all boats. It just so happens to give the smaller boats a slightly bigger relative lift.
And that leaves us with this massive challenge right at the heart of modern economics. We know for a fact that trade creates enormous wealth, but we also know that wealth is never distributed perfectly evenly. So the question becomes, how do you strike the right balance? How do you chase that national gain while making sure the benefits are shared fairly? The standard trade model gives us the tools to understand the problem, but finding that perfect balance, well, that's the tough job that policymakers are still grappling with every single day.